And Elvis Rare Photos on YouTube and Facebook. This is the second part of the Priscilla and her lovers before Elvis. Enjoy. And smoked and drank and all that stuff when she was 12 and 13. This according to all of her friends. That being said, no excuse for Curry's behavior. So he took her to meet Elvis. And, we know the story here. And that story pretty much aligns up with what Priscilla and Elvis's friends tell, that he brought her there, that he was awestruck. Elvis was awestruck by Priscilla. They were making out by 8:30 against a wall, and then he took her upstairs and had her upstairs until 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, Curry was in charge of Priscilla. According to the parents, he was to bring Priscilla back by midnight. Well, it's 1 o'clock, and she comes downstairs looking all unkempt, and he takes her home, and they ask her about it a little bit, but the wife is there because Curry and the wife took Elvis over there, Curry's wife. So they took her home. Now, the rest of the time, pretty much, Curry would always pick up Priscilla, take Priscilla over there, and then ask Priscilla what happened, get some details on the sexual stuff that had gone down. As long as Curry's wife wasn't with them, they would talk about that. And Priscilla would talk about all the details, even though she was a little bit hesitant at first. And one of the times he got so aroused that he pulled over, tried to do something, and she wasn't into it, so he claims that he stopped. And so for all the doubters that are out there, as well as those that believe this, I'm going to go ahead and provide some context from this book. So Priscilla said, but you asked me, would you like to meet Elvis? Priscilla said, well, you said, that's the contention. Would you like to meet Elvis? I go to his house for parties. Curry said, Priscilla, I'm not going to argue about it. I know what happened, and I'm sure you think you know what happened, okay? We're at a standstill here. It didn't happen that way, in my opinion. Priscilla said, okay, that's your opinion. Then the exchange later grew heated. So before I continue on, this is part of a sit-down between Curry and Priscilla in 1996 at the author's house. That was recorded. So continuing on, Curry said, I'm going to tell you my version of it, which is the only true version that I know of. I've lived with it all of these years. Curry said, I've lived with it all of these years. Priscilla said, so have I. I remember it very distinctly. Own publicity too much. Priscilla replied, there hasn't been a, what do you mean my own publicity? Curry said, well, because that's what you put in your book. Priscilla said, that's how it happened, Curry. Curry said, that's not what happened. Had I known that my own book wasn't going to come out for this long of a period of time, I don't care what you put in your book because that's your story. I had my story, which is the true version. Anyway, it's nothing to get upset about. It's just that your version and my version do not match. So they haven't matched for years, so that's okay. As the debate continued, Priscilla modified several key details of her story. Now, something like this is very important because once somebody gets caught in a lie, they have to change their stories around. So it went from that she had seen Curry around the Eagle Club before he invited her to meet Elvis, and that he was known there and he worked there. So prior to that, she had never seen him before, never knew anything about him. And of course, there were witnesses that saw them talking plenty of times. So continuing on, Priscilla said, so if I'm this shy girl that you say I was, how would I ever get the guts to come to you and say, according to all the witnesses that were around, that's not even my nature. High school and junior high years, she was very much like that. She literally would go up to the hottest guys. She would get to know everybody. She was very sociable. Later on, it was her that pursued Mike Stone, even tried to fall back in a chair so Mike would catch her, and Mike didn't. And of course, Mike was married with children at the time. So continuing on, Curry said, you came in that snack bar like a rocket. Priscilla was like, never. Curry said, came straight to the table, man. Priscilla said, people who know me know that's not the way I am. Curry said, well, you were 14 years old, Priscilla. Priscilla was like, but I was so shy at 14. Curry, I mean, once again, everybody that was around her, the guys that dated her, her best friends, said she was not shy like that. That was an act that Curry had taught her to be for Elvis Presley. So Priscilla's second defense in her face-to-face encounter with Curry that day was that she wasn't even a fan of Elvis Presley when she met Curry. Said, "You're talking about Elvis Presley, the most famous entertainer of the world." Priscilla was like, "But I wasn't. Wait a second, Curry. I wasn't that, Curry. Elvis Presley wasn't the item for me. That wasn't. He wasn't. I wasn't." Curry was like, "That's not what you told me. I have all his records. I've seen all his movies. That's what you told me sitting at the table." Priscilla says, like, well, I may have said, do you like him? I may have said I've seen his movies. I may have very well said that. I did not. say that I have all those records. My father got me one record, one album. Of course, that disputes what all of her friends said, that she had all of the records, and that she even gifted records to her friends prior prior to meeting Elvis, prior to dating Elvis, prior to knowing Elvis. So more lies or more misremembering. I thought that was good background to add as we continue with our story, because obviously Priscilla's memory, or what she claims to be truthful, is shot full of holes all of the time, including the huge misremembrance that Curry was kicked out of the inner circle as soon as Priscilla claimed that Curry had something to do with her and tried to force her to do something, or whatever she told Elvis. That wasn't true, because even though Lamar Fike started picking up Priscilla, Curry was still at the house. He was still part of the inner circle all the way until like the 60s, mid 60s. Still at the house. He was still at New Year's Eve. Priscilla claims that she had told Elvis that Curry had tried to take advantage of her, and Elvis got ticked off and kicked him out of the inner circle, which is not true, because that was 1959. Curry Grant was around the whole time. Even after Elvis left the army, he would take pictures of Priscilla for Elvis. He was there on New Year's Eve. He took pictures in 1961 for Elvis Presley. So that's another lie. Going to the airport, Elvis and Priscilla in the car, taken by Curry Grant. And here we're going to also prove that Priscilla lied about that, and she lied about it in the interview, or misremembered. So here's the exchange. Curry and Carol Grant were at the house that evening for the big farewell, and Elvis asked them to bring Priscilla to Bad Nauheim the next morning to say goodbye. That was another point of contention between Curry and Priscilla when they met in the spring of '96. The author asked, did Curry ever see Elvis again after you told Elvis about it? Priscilla he was not there after that. I never saw him at the house after that. Author said, did he drive you to Elvis's house the day Elvis left? Priscilla said, no. To Bad Nauheim? No. Author said, Curry, don't you say that you and Carol drove Priscilla from her home to Elvis's home the day that he left? Curry replied, we just went up there, picked you up, he said to Priscilla, and took you up there. Spent a half an hour in Elvis's house, then we all got in my car. A life cameraman took all the pictures around my car. I'm standing outside, holding the door, in fact, for Elvis and her to get in, so he could say goodbye to his friends. Priscilla, you don't remember that, huh? You've got something up here that's really blocking your memory. I think you've been in this town, LA, too long. Priscilla, caught in another lie, actually left after this exchange, claiming Curry was in a dream world. That night, Joe Esposito phoned the author at Priscilla's request to cast doubt on Curry's story and to reinforce Priscilla's claim that Curry did not drive her to Elvis's house that day Elvis left Germany. This conflict could be independently corroborated. An obscure German magazine in the late 1960s published a photo account of Elvis's last day in Germany. One of the photos showed Curry Grant opening the door of his 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air, just as he described for Priscilla and Elvis. So to the author's point, Curry's veracity on this point did not prove conclusively that Priscilla was lying about everything or in denial about all their points of disagreement, but it went a long way towards establishing his legitimacy and her desperation. Before we continue with the story, Ray Gunther is a scientist and expert witness with 10 years experience evaluating truthfulness, actually measured levels of stress in both of their voices, and we'll go over that later on.